Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Talent Tuesday. I'm Dr. Marsha Gordon, President and CEO of the Business Council of Westchester, the county's leading voice for business in Westchester County. And I'm so excited to welcome you to the second session in our 5-part educational series, The New Rules of Attraction, Finding, Cultivating, and Keeping Talent. We want to especially thank our sponsors for today's discussion: Simone Development, Thale Industries, Westchester County Office of Economic Development, Balancing Life's Issues, and of course, Westchester's ultimate headhunter, the Headless Horseman, our silent spokesperson for 2023, which we have declared at the Business Council of Westchester as the Year of Talent. If you listen to the first panel, which featured several top global and regional executive placement and HR experts, then you heard some fairly provocative and brutally honest insights into the challenges facing organizations today, trying to hire, retain, and cultivate the talent they need to take their companies and nonprofits to the next level of growth. The feedback on the first session was absolutely phenomenal. And I'm sure that this morning's panel will leave us all equally enlightened, delighted, and so ready to implement a flurry of suggestions. No pressure on you speakers. But we know that so much of talent attraction and retention is like the perils of dating and making a good impression. We're swiping today, right? When speaking of a recent bad dating experience, comedian Stephen Wright said, "I almost had a psychic girlfriend, but she left me before we met." I'm not Mrs. Maisel, but it was pretty funny. And equally true of talent attraction, as according to a recent survey conducted by LinkedIn, 75% of job seekers consider an employer's brand before even applying for a job. And more than 50% of candidates first seek out the company's website and then social media to learn more about an employer. That's from the job seeker side. What about the employer? The Business Council of Westchester looked at the flip side of the relationship and conducted our own poll by asking Business Council of Westchester members to select the top 3 initiatives they would undertake to better attract and retain talent within their own organizations. Our members told us this: improving the employee experience at their office, emphasizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, and increasing workplace scheduling flexibility were their top 3 choices. That brings us to today's discussion, getting them to swipe right the latest techniques, technologies, and tips for attracting talent by rebranding and repositioning your own company. From assessing the strength of your current brand strategy to repositioning your social media footprint so you are more attractive to potential employees, what are those practical steps that you can take as employers and we can all take to make that psychic fall in love with us before we even meet? To offer their collective wisdom, we have pulled together an exceptional panel of branding, marketing, and HR experts. Joining us this morning, we have Ted Burkon, president and co-founder of Hot Paper Lantern. Love that name, what a great brand. An integrated marketing communications agency. Ted has more than 2 decades of experience counseling some of the world's largest brands. And prior to agency life, he was a New York City journalist and served as press secretary for the New York City Department of Buildings. Joining Ted is Elena Rivera-Cheek, founder and CEO of Copy and Art, an award-winning creative agency here in Westchester and a winner of our Hall of Fame last year. So an award-winning speaker as well. Like Ted, after spending many years in the ad agency business, Elena founded Copy and Art in 2011 and remains a trailblazing entrepreneur and marketing specialist. And we are also joined by another exciting entrepreneur and someone whose experience is amazing, Diana Barrera, founder and CEO of Rebillo HR. I hope I said that right, Diana. With over 20 years as a human resource professional, Diana launched her own entrepreneurial venture, Rebillo HR, after serving in senior executive positions with well-known companies such as Conagra, Pearson, and Momentum Performance Materials. Thank you all for joining us this morning. For this session, we're going to change the format a bit from our last session and begin with Ted, whose firm recently released a formidable research study titled The 2023 War for Frontline Talent. We were so impressed with the content, we asked Ted to present his findings to kick off this session before heading into the panel discussion. So Ted, the virtual floor is yours.
Marcia, thank you so much. Appreciate it. And I really appreciate being a part of this discussion today. It's a great topic, very timely topic. Lots of changes happening, and it's going to be, I think, a really engaging conversation with all the panelists. So I'm going to share my screen right now and walk you through some top line findings of our report. Marcia, as you mentioned, we are an integrated marketing communications firm. We focus both on internal and external communications. Obviously, for today, we're going to be focused on the employee audience, which really is both an internal and external audience. And we'll talk a little bit about that and how different strategies that we're seeing deployed in the marketplace are working and not working in terms of engaging both recruits and existing employees of our clients' organizations. Everything we do as an agency is audience-led. So whether we're targeting employees or external audiences like customers, investors, et cetera, we look at everything through that audience lens. So what are their current perceptions, feelings of the brand? What are their needs, their desires? And then how do we create campaigns that really drive at those issues? So the messaging and the channels we're using are highly relevant and resonate with those audience. We tend to see, obviously, when we do that, a much greater impact on the audiences that we're trying to reach. And at the end of the day, a lot of our clients are measuring us on, are we influencing that audience and in what way? And how do we measure that? And these days, especially on the digital landscape, there's a lot of testing and learning even within each campaign so that we can optimize the campaigns as we go through it. So that kind of sets the stage for this War for Frontline Talent report that we did recently, because increasingly clients are coming to us with employee relations needs. And there's a few reasons for that, which I'll talk about in a bit. So the research that we did was qualitative. We spoke to about a dozen HR talent and communications executives across a number of different industries like retail, manufacturing, and hospitality. And we really focused around the role and the impact of technology, experience, and sort of the connective thread of communications in attracting and retaining talent of frontline workers. So those are folks, in the manufacturing industry that are working on the factory floor, and the hospitality industry that are working on the front lines of hotels, restaurants, et cetera, and retail, those who are working in stores, where we're seeing a very shifting and interesting landscape. So there is this renewed, as far as we're seeing, there is this renewed and quite frankly, a deserved spotlight on frontline workers. So if you think about what happened during COVID, many frontline workers didn't have the benefit or the opportunity to work from home, right? They had to go to work, and they were on the front, literally on the front lines, helping to keep the economy moving. And instead, we've moved past the pandemic and into this world where we're starting to return to a world that's hybrid in nature, some remote work combined with in-person work. There's this new spotlight on these frontline workers, quite frankly, because a lot of companies are having a very difficult time finding and retaining them. And it's having a major impact on the bottom line of their business. And even though we're reading about layoffs all the time on the headlines, in some industries like tech, a lot of the industries that we're focused on here in this report, like I mentioned earlier, the job market is still very tight, and there's not a lot of talent out there, and they're really being forced to rethink the experience that they provide to not just their existing employees, but to the talent that they're trying to recruit, and every interaction that those recruits have with their brand. And once they're hired, how they transition from recruit to employee, and how that experience continues to improve throughout the life cycle and the tenure of their employment. And one of the things we've noticed, before I get into some of the top line results, is that really for the first time in recent history or recent memory, this is becoming a C-level and a board issue. So especially with mid and larger size companies, but even with smaller companies, CEOs and their boards are really starting to pay attention to this challenge of retention, recruiting and retention. And they're looking to the communications function in particular, as well as obviously HR and IT, to figure out new solutions to attract and retain that talent. And that's an exciting space, obviously, for us in the industry to be in, but it's also extremely challenging, and it's basically putting the spotlight on the power of communications and the ability for communications to either make or break your brand's attractiveness with the employee audience. So a couple of key takeaways from the research, and then I'll talk briefly about some best practices that we saw based on the discussions with those 12 plus executives, as well as some of the things we see just day in and day out working with clients on this front. One of the things that came out in the research is that a lot of companies are now looking at employees as the new influencer. We hear a lot about the influencer community in marketing communications and the desire for brands to align themselves with influencers. And historically, that's really been related to external audiences. Like, how do I get an influencer to make my brand more attractive to a customer, right? So a customer will engage with my brand and buy my products, et cetera. But now what we're seeing on the internal communications front is that the employee themselves is becoming the influencer and is one of the best case studies and spokespeople for the company in terms of attracting new talent and also retaining top talent within the organization. And companies are starting to align their communication strategy around how do we find these influencers and how do we engage with them, and then how do we leverage them so that they can tell our story. So it's not just us, the brand, or the leadership team talking about the company and where it's headed and the vision, et cetera. It's really the employees themselves, the folks that are in the trenches day in and day out, that can talk from real experience about what it's like to work in this organization and why it's a great place to build a career. The other key takeaway that we're seeing across the board is that the customer and the employee experience are really two sides of the same coin. You know, we've been dealing with customer experience for a long time in our industry, in terms of how do you improve the customer experience? How do you make it so that the experience really helps to tell the brand story and to create ambassadors, brand ambassadors among your customers? But what we're finding now is that the better the employee experience really translates into a better customer experience. So if you give your employees great experiences and you build a great culture in which for employees to work in, then that automatically translates into a better customer experience for those brands. So it's an interesting concept of looking at that from that perspective. As far as recruiting is concerned, speed is definitely a competitive weapon these days, and this is especially true among mid and large size businesses that tend to have more red tape in the hiring process. But those that are breaking down the silos, getting rid of the red tape, using technology and automation to help streamline the recruiting process are winning. And they're winning in terms of hiring new talent faster and stealing from the competition. So a lot of this has to do with empowering folks in the market, in the field, empowering managers to arming them with the right communications, the right messaging, and then empowering them to make hiring decisions in real time. to beat the competition. This whole notion of a recruiting mindset throughout the life cycle of an employee's tenure, this is simply don't stop recruiting just because the recruit becomes an employee. There really should be a recruiting mindset, especially in the first 6 to 12 months of an employee's tenure at a company, because that's where a lot of businesses are losing their talent. So that may be because expectations are misaligned based on what they heard in the recruiting process. It may be because they get lost in the shuffle once they get started in the organization. But if you maintain this recruiting mindset, it really enables companies to have touch points, meaningful touch points with new employees as they embark on their journey at that organization. And companies are finding that's helping to reduce attrition rates, especially among new employees. Probably the most important thing out of the research that we did was the importance of people managers in the entire recruiting and retention process of employees. You can have the best business strategy, you can have the best leadership team, you can have great campaigns out there in the market talking about how great the brand is and what you do and why the culture is so great. But if you don't have people managers that know how to communicate effectively with their employees, it all breaks down. So they hold the key. They are the key to communicating the company's strategy and vision to the rank and file. And what we're seeing now is companies investing in training up those managers to make sure that they're really effective and ready to communicate on multiple levels with employees about recruiting, and then once their employees recruit, career pathing and things of that nature. And last but not least, this is not new, but companies that are going through significant transformation, and what company isn't these days, it's really important for communication to HR and IT to have a strong partnership and to be on the same page, because especially from the communications perspective, the function relies heavily on really sound HR policies, as well as really sharp IT to make sure that the messaging from communications is getting into the right hands at the right time, whether it's to a recruit or an existing employee. So figuring out what channels to use, how to use them, and really making sure that your messages are reaching these employees where they are existing is really, really important. Just very quickly, just some best practices. Ongoing listening and learn programs is really important. That can be through both informal and formal means, through employee surveys, town hall meetings, one-on-one water cooler conversations, or Zoom sessions. Making sure that companies have a practice and a policy in place to continually listen to their employee needs is important, because otherwise you're operating blindly on how your employees are feeling. We have been seeing this for years, but it's really become more and more important, leveraging external social media platforms to reach internal audiences. So LinkedIn's a great example. It's an external social media platform. It's not an internal, it's not an intranet. But many companies are turning to LinkedIn and other social media platforms to actually reach employees and to engage with employees, and especially recruits. It's where they already are, so you don't have to build an audience. They're there already, and it's a great way to get your message out and tell your story. Obviously, company culture is critically important, but culture is built through action, not words. So you can't ask your communications function to go build you a culture through words. You have to act it, and it starts with the top, and it goes all the way down to those people managers that we talked about earlier. If they are living, breathing the culture, then the communications becomes a lot easier and more effective. It's really critical when it comes to recruitment and retention that you take this show not tell mentality or approach. It's one thing for me or a CEO or someone at the leadership level to tell you how great it is to work here. It's another to see it and experience it. So identifying employee case studies and stories is really critical as part of your branding and as part of your communications. And last but not least, we talked about this earlier, but empowering managers to communicate and make decisions in the field. Again, the people managers in the field can be your biggest asset or your greatest obstacle, depending on how well trained they are and empowered they are to do their jobs. And last, lastly, make sure your internal branding is given the same priority and treatment as your external branding, right? So oftentimes in the past, internal branding has kind of been an afterthought. It really needs to be prioritized in today's world so that your recruits and your employees experience the brand in the same way that your customers and your other external audiences do. So with that said, I'll stop there, and Marcia, turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Ted. And this was so insightful, especially because all of the tips that you're saying are applied to any size organization, any sector, and can be implemented by all of our listeners and all of our members. So we really, really appreciate your insight. So now let me bring Elena into the conversation. Elena, you're a business owner as well as in the business of creative marketing. Can you share with us how you, the marketer, market yourself to attract and retain talent? And I've been in your office and I see the talent that you're attracting and retaining because they've been with you for a long time. And they're still very, 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 very young professionals. So we love that.
Yes. Well, thank you first for inviting me. That was a great kind of intro to the subject. I think, it's really important to recognize, and this is what we do in our marketing, that really employees are the heart and soul of any business. And so if we start from that foundational kind of mindset, I think everything else follows through. So is it strategic? Do we use certain platforms to hit certain audiences? Absolutely. In our case, we do use LinkedIn, quite a bit on the recruitment, but mostly actually on the client front. And then there are other social media platforms we use to target our employee demos, including like other Press the Flesh initiatives in Westchester, where we partner with colleges, have them come in, speak on panels at career fairs. So it's really a multi-pronged approach to marketing, which isn't only digital. We'll do things on our website and use all of the, available resources, but we're also like out in Westchester and talking to people and putting ourselves out there authentically. I think trying to give a prospective employee the real feel for who Copy and Art is and who they can become, working there, which is important.
Well, I've seen it, Elena, and I love your view, along with Ted's as employees, as the employee, as the key influencer, and you're saying employees are the heart and soul of your business and any business. And I think you live and breathe that. So now, Diana, you've been an HR professional for over 20 years, having worked with major corporations and now consulting with a variety of different types of companies, organizations, and industries. Can you also share with us some of your successful methods for attracting and retaining talent?
Absolutely. And thank you, Marcia, for having me in this panel. It's a pleasure. I want to talk about methods that any company of any type and any size can use. So for attracting talent, there is a simple thing, which is everybody involved in the interview process should be able to speak to the employee value proposition of organization. Why should a talented person work for you? So if the people who are interviewing cannot sell the organization, it's not a good thing, right? So make sure anybody who's participating in interviewing understand what is good about this company. Why should people be going work for you? And there is the concept of segmented employee value propositions too, which is depending on which talent you want to attract, you can tweak your message, right? And the marketing experts do it all the time externally. Well, it's the same for attracting talent. If you are recruiting a scientist, maybe what is going to attract them to your company is different than if you are recruiting lawyers. Maybe it's different if you are recruiting a millennial from a baby boomer. So understanding what the talent is looking for and being able to speak about it. And that, regardless of the size of your organization, You should be able to do that to attract talent. And then for retaining talent, there is a very simple technique called, or method called stay interviews that every organization should be conducting to retain talent. If you're conducting exit interviews, it's too late. You're losing people, you're losing your talent. There is little you can do at that point to keep that person. Stay interviews are the interviews that you do during the year with the people that are in your organization to learn what they enjoy about their job, why they like working in that organization, or what you can improve. And people love to know that the company cares about their thoughts about their organization, about how they feel. So stay interviews are a great method to keep talent in your organization.
So it's really interesting because at the Business Council of Westchester, we turned our regular kind of employee evaluations into those kind of stay interviews. And it's been, and we have a very small organization. We have the best team, as everybody knows, but it's been very, very enlightening to hear why people value working in your organization and also what they might like to see better. So thank you so much. And I love that idea of this segmented value, employee value proposition, Diana, because, you're right. Different things will, if I talk to somebody who wants to be an administrative person and say, well, we're out there all the time, we're meeting all these people. Some people don't like that. And you have to be sensitive to that. So thank you so much. And Ted, I love the concept you described in your presentation, again, such as re-recruiting. I mean, it kind of builds on the same concept, the importance of speed, as well as the importance of communications, especially internal communications for management. What communication tools or training would you develop and deliver to frontline management who may not be the best communicators in order to improve overall internal communications? I mean, this is kind of a new skill that we have to be building in our companies.
Yeah, absolutely. It is a new skill. And so the best way I can describe it is, for years when we have been doing external communications, we do a ton of media training, which is essentially working with leadership and different spokespeople in the organization to prepare them to mainly speak with media, reporters, but other external audiences as well. So what we've done is we've taken that concept and tailored it for the internal audience and for people managers and particularly to simulate a number of different situations and conversations and questions that they're likely to get, depending on whether they're talking to a recruit or they're in the re-recruiting process of talking to an existing employee who's being onboarded, or maybe someone who's been there for quite some time. Because one of the things that people managers have said to our clients is, listen, we've never been trained officially on how to communicate these messages that were handed down from corporate. We kind of understand what the messages are, but we don't really know the story behind it. So if you can train us up on what is that story, what do you want us to really convey and get across? And probably most importantly, like I said earlier, how do I deal with some difficult questions? Like when these difficult questions arise, like I don't want to be a deer in headlights. I don't want to say, oh, well, you'll have to talk to someone in leadership about that. You've basically lost the conversation if and when that happens. So in training them to say, okay, when you get these questions, here are ways you can answer them effectively. And it doesn't mean you need to know everything. It doesn't mean you need to have an answer every time a question's asked, but there are ways to make sure that the employee feels heard and that you are giving them a response that satisfies their need for more information, whether it's in the moment or in follow-up. So that's really what we're talking about. And it's become, for companies that commit to it, whether you have you have to train a few or many, they've really reaped the rewards of it because it's empowered this people manager level to carry the message into the field. And listen, the last thing I'll say about this is, we know the old adage, like people don't quit companies, they quit their bosses. And so, if you arm your people managers with how to communicate effectively, that is going to help keep your attrition rates much lower over time.
Very, very, very interesting. Any bosses out there, did that resonate with you? I hope not. But it's always good to keep in your mind, because we have to be good bosses, and we have to be good leaders. And these are new important skills to develop. And Elena, one of the value propositions about working for Copy and Art is that you're in an absolutely gorgeous office space, which you have developed. You just moved there, you've developed it. It's so inviting, seems to be the perfect environment for fostering collaboration. How important was talent attraction, retention, and cultivation when it came to designing your workspace? And if you can also comment, this is a long question, but there's so much meat here, on integrating remote workers versus the in-office experience, given the collaborative environment and really very special environment you have built.
Thank you. And I think, the new office for Copy and Art really represents what we hear, is that it represents what talent in Westchester may have looked for in the past in Manhattan. They love the windows, and they love the modern, sophisticated, but also cool and collaborative environment. But they hated taking the Metro North down and having to go into New York City. So really what we did was we thought about how could we bring that experience to Westchester. And when everybody was moving out of offices, we were custom building our space. And many people told us, don't do it. Nobody's going to ever go back. But really, we understand the nature of our business, which is collaboration and working together and creative. So we will always have to get in the room together, of course, safely during a pandemic, but certainly that is the nature of it. So when we built the space, we really thought about what would the ideal space be? So we have some open area. We have collaboration spaces. We have a wellness room with a Peloton. We have a beautiful employee lounge. We have living walls and a wine fridge and a refrigerator that shoots out music. It's really kind of built for the ideal experience. Marcia, you're going to spend a lot of time at work, and our philosophy is that it should be enjoyable. Work is work, but it can be enjoyable, and it should be fun. And so that was the philosophy that we had going into it. And so our architects and designers and our team really kind of put all of our heads together to build that thing. And I think it's been a success. And of course, the employee was the heart of every design element. It was built for them. They're the ones who walk in and spend time there. So really, we thought about what not only our existing team, who's supremely important to us, would want. We talked to them about that. But we also thought, what are future copy and artists going to want? We're hiring like crazy right now, Marcia. And so what do these prospects want? What are the people that we don't even know are going to be copy and artists? What do they want? And so we took that and we built the space, and I'm glad you love it too.
Love it. I really love it. And can we just go back to the remote worker? Do you have remote work? And how does that?
Yeah.
How are you working with that? And how does that integrate into this gorgeous office experience?
So I think, if you're thinking about what the worker needs, then you're thinking about what the worker needs. And we have to balance the needs of our clients, our business, and our workers, but not in that order. And they want a hybrid schedule. They want a hybrid schedule. I want a hybrid schedule. I'm a human. And so we are in office Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. That's standing. Monday, Fridays from home. And we've been doing that for as long as we've been back, and it seems to really work. If somebody needs extra flex, they have an appointment, something's going on, they have kids. We respect and trust our employees. They get the job done exceptionally well. So what they need on a case-by-case basis, we give them. But we are in office 3 days and out of office 2 days. So far, so great with that. And we're very happy. And our office was built so that we have these wireless remote kind of connection systems. So you can see people who are working remote. We can go into conference rooms and easily connect. So the space was built for the future, not for where we are today. So we leverage technology to make sure that it's a kind of seamless experience, whether you're working from home or you're in the office.
So that's really insightful and really a great segue into question for Diana. Diana, with the change in the corporate environment, hybrid, remote, in office, you have so much HR experience. How has the process of employee cultivation and retention changed over the past 20 years? And what are 2 or 3 of the most valuable lessons that you've learned that you can share with our members and that you share with your clients, obviously?
Sure. I think what has changed is the labor market and the war in talent that has made employers realize the huge impact of losing a good employee, a talented individual. You're going to spend months recruiting. Then if you're lucky to find the person, there is a huge learning curve. And also, while you were recruiting, the employees who were left in the company have to fill the vacancies. So they are stretched and stressed, and there is burnout. So the cost of losing talent, now employers realize it, and they don't want to lose good employees, right? And I think when you talk about lessons, I want to say the most important lesson is how valuable are talent reviews in an organization for the success of any size organization. And talent reviews are different than performance reviews. Performance reviews are about how is the employee doing today? Let's give them a rating and maybe a merit. A talent review is about what is the potential of the employee? What can they be one day? What can we do to help them grow? And what roles can they fill in the future? So it helps an organization prepare for future vacancies. So like if you are thinking, maybe we have somebody who's going to retire in 3 years. Well, who do we have in the organization who is so talented that we can put on a program to learn so they can backfill that employee in 3 years? Or do you have a retention risk? Do you need plan A and B in case somebody very valuable leaves? So talent reviews is you're looking at the employees and what they can be one day, not what they are today, and building development plans to get there. This helps an organization to really be prepared for the future, and it helps good employees because they get well known, they get spoken about them in the room as talented individuals and how they can grow. So I always advise clients, if you don't have talent reviews on your organization and you only have performance reviews, you should establish once a year talent discussions, which is not the same as performance.
Got it. Very, 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 very insightful and very important. Elena, I'm going to ask you again, since you work with a lot of young people, and Ted, I'm going to ask you to think about this question also to kind of comment on it afterwards. But Elena, I love on how your company website and through social media channels, you actively promote what was once considered only important for a quick email, such as when a new intern joins your agency. I really love that. Can you share with us your insights into the effectiveness of this kind of communications campaign and its potential impacts?
Sure. I mean, so when I say employees are the heart of copy and art, I mean it. Whether they're going to be future employees or they're existing employees. And one of the things we try to do in every piece of internal marketing is really honor the people who are there. So interns, what we do is the way we do it is kind of complicated. Once you know the differentiated value proposition for copy and art, it's kind of hard to find talent that already works the way we work. And so training is a strong suit for us. We have a build strategy. So it's not just like trying to recruit from other agencies. Like, we want to build the talent. And so we have to have more freshmen if we want more seniors. And so we've had a really great experience with interns. We've hired a bunch of them. And we honor them. Marcia, I was an intern. And I actually just had a couple of mentors on my podcast to talk about the importance of interns and mentorship. I was a successful intern, and I think being an intern exposes young people to the realities of today's workforce experience. And since I really truly believe in the experience of copy and art, getting young people in, and as we talked about earlier, using them as influencers, you'd be so surprised how many of our interns turned employees have helped us identify strong talent that go, wait, I love that agency you're at. Tell me more. And then we get this stream of warm prospects that already kind of know who we are. And there's a lot less energy that has to go out into the social media world because we have our own people helping us. And so I think we touched on that earlier, but we really put it to work at Copy and Art. And interns are, employees are as well, but interns are a really great way. We give them real work. We give them real tests. We show them what the real working world is. And then we hope that when the time comes, they choose us. And since we've invested all that time training, it seems to work.
Very, very important. And Ted, do you want to comment also on what your company does in terms of communications campaigns?
Yeah, absolutely. We invest a lot of time in our social channels for similar purposes. One of the things that my thought on this, and it's a little bit different, I think, than most in at least in my industry, is that I'm realistic. I know people are not going to stay at HPL forever. I mean, no one stays in the same job anymore for their careers, almost no one. Whether it's a few years or several years, my goal as an agency owner is to create an environment and a culture in which they can not only enjoy themselves, obviously, and want to come to work, but most importantly, where they can learn the most amount possible about things that really drive them and that they're passionate about. So I almost look at our agency as like a teaching hospital, in the sense that I want people to try new things. I want people to dig into areas of the business that they're really interested in and where they really feel they have a lot of talent. I don't want to lose talented people, don't get me wrong, but I think in this business, you have to be realistic, and you're always going to have a certain amount of attrition. And I also believe that sending people out into the market after they've been with you for a few years and really hone some skills and have some good talent, that always comes back around to benefit us in the end. They become clients. They refer us new employees. So to me, it's a small industry that we operate in for the most part. I'm always in it for the long game. My goal is, while you're at HPL, whether it's a few years or, if we're lucky enough to have you for a longer time than that, I want you to have the best possible experience. So you go forth saying, great agency, great place to work, would highly recommend it. And oh, by the way, if I ever go to the corporate side, I'm going to hire you guys. That's the ultimate goal of ours in the long run. So I know it's a little bit different than what most people talk about when it comes to retention, but it's just the experience I've had working in an agency environment for the last 20 plus years.
I think, I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that, but I think that's very, very realistic. I've had it happen, myself. I've done it myself, and I hear that from members a lot. Whatever profession they're in, not only creative but professional services and others as well. So, Diana, you are an expert in helping employers infuse diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DEI, into their recruitment and employee cultivation processes. Can you speak about how employers can embrace DEI to attract and retain talent?
Yes, and when I saw one of the phrases that Ted had in this slide, I thought about DEI. The slide said, build company culture through actions, not words. A lot of companies talk about DEI, but there are no real actions behind. There are two concrete things that a company can do. One, put a budget or resources to the effort, right? Because if you really want to do it, you commit money or people to DEI efforts. And the other aspect is have leadership teams or leaders in the organization that look like the workforce in the US, right? The people that employees are aspiring to get to, those roles, they reflect the population. If an organization has a leadership team that does not look like the employees or the workforce, it's hard to believe that they are truly committed to DEI. So it's about the actions and not the words, like what Ted had in the slides.
Marcia, can I jump in and just add
Yeah,
one
Ted
piece
and
of that?
Lena, please
Diane,
comment on that.
I think what you said is so spot on. And one of the things that we've been talking about more this year because of the situation with the economy is, it's one thing when the economy is booming, it's easy for companies to commit dollars to DE&I efforts, right? I mean, it's a no-brainer for them for the most part. Where I think the rubber really meets the road is in a bad economy, do they stay committed to those DE&I efforts? Because they are looking at cost cutting across the board, and depending on the industry, we're talking about some more severe than others. And as a recruit or certainly as an employee, I would be asking my leadership team, even during bad times, are you going to stay committed to it? And I think that really shows, whether or not they believe firmly in those DE&I efforts that they're talking about. And the other thing I'll just say to this, and this is more from through a communications lens, is companies have to be very careful not to talk about their DE&I efforts in a way where they're trying to make themselves look better than they are. And one of the things I tell clients all the time is that you are a work in progress. No one expects you to be perfect, especially if you're at a company where historically you haven't invested in DE&I efforts. It's the fact that you're making an effort, you're committing resources and budget, but you're not perfect and you still got a long way to go. If you take that positioning, you're much better off than if you say, yeah, we're great. Look how awesome we are because of all this DE&I efforts that we're doing. That's where brands can get themselves in real trouble, both with employees and external audiences.
Yeah.
Great.
I think,
yeah, Lena.
Yeah, I'm super passionate about this.
I know.
So, I think one of the things you can do when we're talking about words versus actions is kind of mute the company for a second and look at who they actually hire. Because I think to the original point in communications, a lot of people talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. So what does that mean? Do they actually hire people from the agency? So we're getting a lot of calls these days, Marcia, because people like the fabric of the company. And they're like, so we're trying to, from a customer perspective, we're trying to engage diverse audiences. So we don't want a one size fits all agency. We want a diverse agency because kind of even fundamentally, it seems pretty common sense that you might be able to better attract when you have a little bit more experience and you have diverse thought at the table. So we're actually winning a lot of even major large corporations are coming to us because they're like, you're actually diverse. Like not just from my perspective as the founder and CEO, but if you look at who we hire, like you actually believe in this and you put it into action, and therefore we trust you even at a large corporate level to do the same for us. So I think, as brands, as employees, as owners, as business leaders, we need to actually stop before we're trying to persuade an audience. We should persuade ourselves, and we should look around us to ensure that before we try to convince someone else that if they look at us, that they see the thing we're trying to actually push out to the market.
Very, very, very important. One more question I'm going to ask, and I'm going to ask a lightning round question. What about people that have been with you? We talk about a lot about attracting young people. What about either recruiting senior people or keeping your senior people? Do you have to do anything special for them?
Well, I can jump in. I don't know if I would say special, but I think this goes back to knowing your audience. And Diane, I think you mentioned this earlier, the needs of a a Gen Xer are going to be potentially very different from a Gen Zer, right? So, you have to tailor the recruiting messaging and process for each audience that you're trying to recruit. And this also applies to the people who are doing the interviewing, right? Like you've got to make sure that they understand the needs of the person or the audience that they're recruiting for and talking to, so that they can address those needs and showing them what's the career path look like for someone who has already been in the business for 20, 25 years, and where do they go from there, and how is the organization prepared to shepherd them through that if they join the team. So it's not, Marsha, it's not really, I don't think it's overly complicated. I just think it's going in fully knowing who you're talking to, what their needs are, and how do you, in a very transparent way, talk about the role at hand and how that might really fit into what that candidate is looking for from his or her next job.
Great. Elena?
My take on it is, I think your question was around what's the strategy in terms of like existing leadership and whether there's any difference in retaining
senior level people. Yeah.
Right, seniors. And so I think, our experience is that it's a very similar approach. And I think that even with a company that's growing, you can take time to understand what that individual leader needs, because everything is always changing and people's lives are changing. Their children might be getting older. They might have, they might have kids going into college. They might have kids getting married and having babies. Depending on where they are in their life, what they're going to need in terms of their career is going to evolve. We're all always evolving. And so I think having a finger on the pulse to what your leaders need, and I found that it works. It's pretty relationship based. Hear where they are in life. Ask them, what do you need from copy and art as you move into this new era in your life for this next phase? And they'll tell you. If you ask and you listen, they'll tell you.
I was just at a meeting yesterday with the governor of the senior leaders in regional economic development across the state. And this is a group that's made up of academics and business people. And one of the things that I heard that is so true is continuous from the beginning of your life, from cradle to grave, continuous learning. And we often think about sending our younger people for training and conferences and all of that, but think about sending your entire team and providing opportunities for that continuous learning and continuous development, no matter where people are in their careers. I personally think that's very important. So is there anything that we've missed or anything that you want to especially highlight before we wrap up this fabulous webinar?
Marsha, one thing I would just say that we haven't talked about, which is very important to this topic, is the role of mental health or the impact of mental health. And I believe very strongly that there is no separation really between personal and professional lives, right? Like you bring, if the challenges you have in your personal life, you bring to work with you. It's inevitable. You're human. It's hard to separate the two. So taking that as an employer into consideration and providing people with mental health strategies and tools and resources is critically important, especially given what we've been through over the last few years. And I just think that's going to have a major impact on employers' ability to recruit and retain talent, especially as you talk about people moving through different life stages and the toll that takes on their mental health.
And we will be covering that in one of our next panels on benefits. It's something, frankly, that we've done at the Business Council of Westchester. Even in our small organization, we've offered that opportunity on a very formal basis. So with that, does anyone else have any? Diana, Elena, anything to wrap it up, or I think you've shared so much. It's been amazing. So thank you so much. I want to thank Ted Burkon, Elena Rivera-Cheek, and Diana Barrera for sharing with us their wealth of experience and practical advice, very practical advice that we can all implement starting today. And I want to thank today's sponsors who realize that talent attraction and development is so basic and important to economic development, especially today. It's the #1 issue we're hearing from our employers. And that's why the Business Council of Westchester is offering these opportunities, is offering our headless horsemen riding around Westchester and the Hudson Valley and New York to find employees and find jobs for people with our members. So thank you to Simone Development, Thale Industries, Westchester County Office of Economic Development, and Balancing Life's Issues. And talking about balancing life's issues, after each panel discussion, we're going beyond the panel with a podcast that will be made available in the coming days as an extension of this morning's conversation, as well as a replay of today's broadcast. So special thanks to Wendy Wollner of Balancing Life's Issues and her team for producing the ongoing podcast series. And if you know somebody who's looking for a job, go to westchesterwantsyou.com to register on the BCW's Talent Attraction Portal. And if you're an employer that's looking for employees, let us know, because we can find ways to highlight your searches and work with you to find special people. So remember, we are absolutely not the headhunters, but we are about a network of great people and great employees and employers. So we're really, really pleased to be working with Larry Gottlieb from our Martin Company, who's working with us on this initiative. Our next Talent Tuesday is May 2nd, Building a Healthier Relationship, Attracting and Cultivating Talent with the Benefits that Manage Most. And there are some really different and interesting benefits out there. We'll discuss a whole new way of looking at benefits as a talent attraction and retention tool. So don't miss out on that session. It's May 2nd. So with that, thank you to our speakers, thank you to our attendees, and enjoy the rest of your Talent Tuesday. Have a great day.